Your Honor, I have been silenced for far too long. The words sliced the air like a knife. The courtroom, moments ago full of the low hum of whispers and the rustle of papers, remained silent in disbelief. All eyes were on the woman at the witness stand. Meri Brown, her shoulders trembled ever so slightly, not out of frailty, but out of the turmoil of feelings she had harbored for years. She wasn't just addressing the judge. She was addressing Kody Brown, the wives who sat watching from their benches, the audience behind her, and the millions outside the courtroom who had watched them from a TV screen. Her voice did shudder. Yes, but her words had the force of decades. On the other side of the room, Kody Brown fidgeted in his chair. His golden curls, once a sign of charm and assurance, now clung to his forehead as though soaked with perspiration. His jaw was clenched, his lips tightened to a thin, anxious line. The man who had stood before cameras, braggadocioing about his ideal plural family, now appeared cornered, his air of control eroding. The fluorescent lights in the courtroom were harsh, chiseled shadows on his face. No cutting room, no do-over, no producer to tame his features. Just the real deal. Meri stood firm. She had on a plain navy blue dress, nothing flashy, but the determination in her stance made her command like a queen reclaiming her kingdom. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't avert them from the judge. This wasn't merely another family feud. This was the trial that risked tearing down all that the Browns had established. Financially, emotionally, publicly. And across from them were the women who had once been her sister wives. Christine's face was ablaze. Her eyes scrunched up, lips pursed. Her arms were crossed, her body forward as if poised to stand up and yell at a moment's notice. She was not here to defend Kody. Not now. What she had gone through herself made her a partner in truth, even if she was not the one on trial today. Alongside her, Janelle sat in her placid, tranquil style. She wasn't shooting daggers like Christine, nor retreating like Robin. Rather, she observed with unflinching eyes, weighing as if taking stock of each word, each hesitation, each hint of expression from both Meri and Kody. She was the quiet tempest, the one who never made a sound yet, always discerned the reality concealed behind the storm. And then there was Robin. Anxious, white-knuckled, holding her hands together so hard they turned white. She muttered to herself at times, shaking her head as if she could refuse what was happening right in front of her eyes. She had been the favorite one for so long, the one Kody put above everybody else. But now in this courtroom, favoritism couldn't save anyone. The judge, a mature woman with a warm but resolute gaze, tapped the gavel lightly on the desktop. Not to quiet Meri, but to bring the room back into focus. Continue, Mrs. Brown. The court is attentive. Meri took a deep breath. Her chest fell, then rose again as she steadied herself. The loneliness of the years, the nights of weeping, the betrayal that had drained her heart, it all welled to the top. She had rehearsed this speech in her mind 1,000 times, but the act of delivering it here to Kody was much more daunting than she had ever conceived. I was the first wife. She started, her words gentle but traversing the quiet room. The believing wife, the trusting wife. I devoted my life to a vision of family, love, and oneness. And yet, for years, I was made invisible within my own marriage. Kody's gaze shifted away, not able to encounter hers. Meri clutched the stand's edge, anchoring herself. He silenced me. Not with words, but with neglect. With cold shoulders, with broken promises. With the way he looked through me as if I was a shadow, while placing others on a pedestal. I was erased from my own story. Christine's lips opened a little, her eyes unfocusing. Janelle's head nodded, as if accepting every sentence as fact. Robin's face contorted, though whether it was fear or guilt, no one knows. The crowd behind them, reporters, curious onlookers, and even fans who had listened to the family's story unfold, squirmed uneasily. This wasn't stage drama on television. This was genuine, harsh, and heartbreaking. Meri's hands shook, but she raised them from the stand and laid them upon her heart. I've been silenced long enough. But today, I will not be silent. Today, I insist on being heard. Not as the forgotten wife. Not as the supporting character in Kody Brown's tale, but as a woman who gave everything and was given nothing. A drop of tears rolled down her cheek, but she did not wipe it. She allowed the world to see her hurt. Kody finally broke his silence. His voice low, sounding almost defensive. Meri, this isn't fair. Her head whipped toward him, and for the first time in years, her eyes met his without terror. Fair? She spat, her voice shaking with anger and sorrow. Was it fair when you flaunted your love for Robin, while I pleaded for crumbs of love? Was it fair when you said I didn't matter anymore? Was it fair when you wiped out decades of marriage as if I was a mistake? Kody flinched. Robin squeezed her hands tighter. Christine exhaled sharply, muttering something under her breath. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Brown, you will have your chance to respond. For now, let her speak. The courtroom fell silent again. Meri drew another breath. This trial isn't all about money. It isn't all about property. It's about dignity. About truth. About finally being able to hold accountable the man who built a business on deception and favoritism at the expense of destroying the women who trusted him. The force of her words hung heavy in the air, weighing down all who were gathered. A woman in the rear row wiped away tears. A journalist wrote wildly in his notebook, already envisioning the headline. The jury shifted, their expressions unreadable, but clearly shaken. Meri Brown was not the background for the first time in her life. She was the storm. She was the voice that no one could avoid. And as she stood there, trembling but unbroken, the audience realized this was not just the beginning of a court case. This was the beginning of Meri's rebirth. The judge gave a small nod, and Meri's attorney, a sharp woman in a charcoal suit, stepped forward with a stack of files so thick it looked like a book. She adjusted her glasses, glanced at Meri reassuringly, then turned to face the court. Your Honor, what we are going to show you are not allegations plucked out of thin air. These are records, bank transactions, and emails, each one revealing a story of intentional betrayal. Her voice reverberated in the chamber, every syllable weighed down. Kody sat back in his chair, muscles tensing in a forced grin, but any observer would note the tick in his jaw, the moisture starting to be visible near his temples. He folded his arms like he was bracing himself against the snowstorm that was going to crash down. The attorney waved the first page. This is a bank deposit. 3 years old. Mr. Brown routed joint money into an account in Robin Brown's name. That in itself could be seen as harmless, but she paused dramatically, drumming on the papers. This was conducted without consulting Mrs. Brown, even though she had an equal stake in said money. There were murmurs in the gallery. Christine's face went red. She hunched over, speaking in a low, urgent whisper to Janelle. He did the same to us. You know he did. Janelle nodded slowly, gravely. She said nothing, but the flash of knowledge in her eyes spoke for itself. Robin moved restlessly, her fists clenched around the hem of her skirt. She mouthed words, not true, but her lips trembled with her anxiety. Meri sat quietly, pale but firm. She didn't have to say a word now. The papers spoke for her. For years she had felt the weight of suspicion, of knowing in her very bones that she was being pushed aside, that the family business she had helped create was being taken away from her. And now, evidence was finally out in the open to the world. The lawyer continued. We also have email records, communications between Mr. Brown and his financial advisor, where he explicitly states, Meri's share isn't a priority, put everything under Robin's control. The courtroom gasped audibly. Even the judge's eyebrows lifted slightly before she composed her face back into neutrality. Meri's lips parted. She closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down. But this time it wasn't just grief. It was vindication. The words she had always suspected, but never been able to prove, were finally in black and white. Kody broke. He slammed his palm on the table. Those emails are taken out of context. He barked, his voice sharp with desperation. The judge slammed her gavel down. Mr. Brown, calm yourself. You will have your say. But his tantrum only served to make him appear smaller. His face reddened, His chest heaved and fell too rapidly. For a man who had once possessed the patriarch's confidence, he now appeared a cornered child. The attorney continued, unabated. Your Honor, this isn't a matter of one or two financial decisions. This is a pattern. Mr. Brown removed Meri systematically from the family's economic future, all the while presenting himself to the world as a husband committed to equity. He stole from her not only money, but also dignity. She added another stack of papers to the table. Text messages, she said in a plain tone. The judge nodded. The lawyer read out, I don't have to tell Meri about this. She won't count in the long term. The words sat there like poison. Christine put her hand over her mouth, shaking her head. Janelle's eyes flashed with fury. Robin shifted once more, a tear rolling down her cheek this time. Shame or fear? It was impossible to say. The people in the back row of the courtroom whispered angrily. Journalists wrote furiously, one mouthing to the other. This is going to be the headline. This right here. Meri, unable to remain silent, breathed hoarsely. I gave him everything. Her voice broke, and she hastily covered her lips, but the words drifted across the courtroom anyway. Her attorney put a light touch on her arm. And now everyone knows, she said quietly, and then looked back at the judge. Your Honor, the lawyer went on, Mrs. Brown invested in this family, this empire, not only emotionally but financially. She gave up her time, her freedom and her future, only to be systematically erased. This is not negligence. This is betrayal. Intentional, calculated betrayal. Kody leaned forward, struggling to speak. Meri was unhappy a long time before this. She pulled away. But he got no further. Christine sprang up, unable to keep still. Don't you dare blame her, Kody, she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the courtroom. There were gasps of surprise. The judge slammed up her gavel. Mrs. Brown, sit down. Christine's chest heaved as she slowly sat, but her glare never wavered from Kody. Her words had already cut through the air, and everyone knew she was telling the truth from her own wounds. Meri's hands tightened into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel her whole body trembling, but she forced herself to keep her head high. Every document read aloud, every message revealed, was another crack in the carefully built wall Kody had created to keep her silent, and with every crack she grew stronger. Her attorney placed the last batch of documents on the table. Your Honor, these are deeds to property. Ground originally promised to Mrs. Brown, was quietly transferred into Robin's name. Not only was this a betrayal of trust, but of contractual obligations. Mr. Brown made sure that the woman who gave him nearly half a century of her life would have no claim on the very house she had helped to raise. The room fell silent. Meri was out of breath. She recalled the late nights working, saving, assisting with keeping the home afloat, thinking it was all for a collective future. To have those efforts given to another wife, as she stood outside in the cold, it was a wound too deep for words. The judge pushed forward, her face impassive, but her voice stern. The court sees the submission of these documents. They will be admitted into evidence. Kody remained still, his complexion white now. His bravado had drained from him. He began to open his mouth, but nothing emerged. For once the man who never seemed to lack something to say was at a loss for words. Meri gasped for air shakily, her voice cracking as she at last whispered, It's all here, everything I feared, everything he denied. And for the first time the whole courtroom could see the truth revealed. Kody Brown hadn't merely failed his wife. He had betrayed her with purpose, cutting her from their empire as if she'd never been. The heavy silence that followed was more than any words could be. This wasn't proof. This was Meri's life. Her heartbreak, her erasure, laid out black and white for everyone to see. The judge's gavel tapped delicately. Mrs. Brown, please come to the stand. The room changed with expectation. This was what everyone had been waiting for. Not the cold hard paperwork. Not the bank transfers or clandestine emails. But Meri herself. Her voice, her truth. Meri stood up, rising gradually, her pace firm but slow with the weight of years. She came to the witness stand, the sound of her shoes clicking on the floor echoing in the hush. All eyes tracked her, some out of compassion, some with respect, some with judgment, but none could avoid her gaze. She sat down, her fists clenched tightly in her lap. Her lawyer nodded reassuringly at her, but Meri didn't glance in her direction. Her eyes locked directly onto Kody, and for the first time ever she didn't flinch. The judge talked softly. "Mrs. Brown, you may testify." Meri clutched the microphone, her knuckles pale. Her voice trembled at first, but she didn't recoil. "I was the first wife." The words echoed like a mandate. "I was the one who held on when everyone else didn't. I was the one who believed that love could be mutual, that family could be based on harmony. I invested my youth, my heart and my faith in this man." She pointed to Kody, her gaze not wavering from his face. "And what did I get? Silence, isolation, betrayal." The room breathed in collectively. Mary's throat constricted, but she pushed forward. "For years I tried to tell myself it was my fault, that perhaps I wasn't enough, that if I just remained silent, if I just kept going, if I just gave a little more, he would come back to me. But instead, he erased me." Her voice broke, and she hastily swiped away a tear, not wanting it to make her weak. Do you ever sit at a dinner table with family and feel like a ghost? Do you ever see your husband laugh with another woman while you become invisible? Do you ever plead for a scrap of love and have cold eyes tell you that you are no longer important? Christine's lips trembled. She blinked rapidly, tears welling up. Janelle looked down, pressing her lips together as if holding back her own flood of emotions. Even Robin's face crumpled, her shoulders shaking as silent tears streamed down. But Kody, he sat rigid, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the table. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a mixture of shame and anger. Mary's gaze hardened. "You said those words to me, Kody. Remember? You told me I didn't matter anymore, that I was just present, a placeholder. Do you know what those words did to me? They destroyed me. They drained the life from me. And still I remained. I remained because I believed in us. I remained because I hoped against hope, that you would recall the woman who stood beside you when no one else would." Her voice was raised now, her years of suppressed anger. "But you never did. You replaced me years before the papers were signed. You paraded Robin around like your queen, while I sat home wondering why I wasn't enough." Robin gasped quietly, covering her lips. Her gaze flicked to Kody, but he would not meet her eyes. The audience shifted awkwardly. Some even dabbed at their eyes. This was not the polished, guarded Meri of television interviews. This was naked, unedited, a woman spilling out her soul to the world. The judge leaned forward slightly, her face softened but alert. "Mrs. Brown, take your time." Meri nodded, taking a trembling breath. She put a shaking hand on her chest. "I am not here to kill him. I am not here for revenge. I am here for justice. Justice for the years I devoted, for the sacrifices I made, for the dignity he took from me." Her gaze met Kody again. "I was invisible to you. But today I will not be invisible to this court. Today I will not be invisible to the world." Her words cut like thunder. The courtroom was so quiet that the scratching of a reporter's pen on paper was audible. Kody finally spoke up, his tone low and strained. "Meri, I tried. You know I tried." Her head was cocked a bit, her face a combination of shock and grief. "Tried? That's what you say. Ignoring me, making fun of my attempts, telling me that I didn't count. That was not trying, Kody. That was leaving." Christine leaned forward, whispering cruelly. "She's telling the truth. She's telling all of us lived." Janelle nodded softly, her fingers closing harder over her notebook. The lawyer approached the stand gently. "Mrs. Brown, can you tell the court how this betrayal has affected you personally?" Meri took a breath, her voice reduced but still laced with anguish. "It shattered me. It made me doubt my value. As a woman, as a wife, as a human. I lay awake at night, wondering why I wasn't good enough. I bore shame that wasn't mine to bear. And the worst part was, I believed him. I believed the lie that I was expendable. That I didn't count. Her shoulders trembled. But she raised her chin defiantly. But I do matter. I always did. And I am here today to ensure no one ever forgets that again. Tears streamed freely down her face now. But she did not conceal them. The vulnerability only served to make her strength more undeniable. The judge nodded slightly, her own eyes shining. The jury shifted, visibly affected, a few even swallowing hard. Kody sat mute, helpless to speak, powerless to defend. For once the man who lived for dictating terms had no words. Meri's last words on the stand cut through the air like lightning. I may have been erased in his eyes, but I will not be erased in history. Today I reclaim my voice. Today I reclaim my worth. And with that, the courtroom exploded. Not with sound, but with the raw power of silence. A silence so intense, it seemed to be louder than thunder. Because in that instant everyone knew. Meri Brown was no longer the overlooked wife. She was the woman who stood, shattered but unbroken, and demanded to have the world look at her. The air inside the courtroom was heavy. Meri's testimony still lingered like smoke after a fire, clinging to everyone's lungs. The silence that followed her words had been more powerful than any shouting match. But now, it was Kody's lawyer's turn. A tall man in a sharp navy suit rose from his chair, straightening his tie with a practiced flick. He stepped to the center of the room, standing before the jury with a well-practiced smile. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not forget, emotions though strong, can manipulate facts. Mrs. Brown is undoubtedly injured. Yes, but injured feelings are not equal to betrayal. Mr. Brown has done what he was able, in extraordinary circumstances, to provide for a big and complex family. He shifted, pointing towards Kody, as if introducing a misunderstood hero. Keeping up with several homes, balancing romance, raising kids, it's not simple. And sometimes even with the best of intentions, Mr. Brown was unable to please everyone the same way. That is not betrayal. That is human limitation. Kody straightened up, his lips compressing into a subtle smirk as though he was convinced the tide was changing. He crossed his arms, agreeing with every statement. But the attorney was not finished. His voice turned stern. What we have before us, ladies and gentlemen, is not an abandoned husband but an estranged woman who distanced herself, who withdrew, and now wants to chastise him publicly. Meri's jaw clenched. She sat still, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. Christine whispered harshly, "Oh no, he is not blaming her again." Her knuckles were white as she gripped the edge of the bench. The attorney spread his arms, as if charting the truth itself. Let us not be deceived by tears and emotional pleadings. Let us examine this logically. Mr. Brown did not set out to wipe anyone out. He only attempted to make it through a complicated family situation. To punish him for not being perfect is unfair. He returned to his seat with a satisfied nod. Kody leaned in to whisper something to him, both men sharing a smug glance. But the smugness lasted only seconds. Meri's attorney stood, her heels clicking against the polished floor like warning shots. She carried a slim black folder in her hands, her face unreadable but her eyes sharp. "Your Honor," she started, her tone level but with an edge of steel. "The defense would say that Mr. Brown acted out of human fallibility. But we have something to present to this court. Something which displays not fallibility, but intent." She opened the folder and drew out a small device. The room leaned forward in unison. "These," she held it up, "are tapes. Dialogues recorded during closed-door meetings between Mr. Brown and his advisors. These tapes will confirm not only that he was neglecting Mrs. Brown, but that he deliberately chose to dismiss her from importance." Kody's head whirled around toward her. "What?" His voice broke. The lawyer hastened to whisper to him, "Calm down." But it was too late. Panic had already gained ground. The judge arched an eyebrow. "Go on." The lawyer pushed a button. Through the speakers, Kody's voice rang out in the courtroom. Clear. Indisputable. "Meri doesn't count anymore. She's just there. Place everything in Robin's name." She's the future. Not Meri. The room stopped breathing. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Christine's eyes widened in fury, her hand shooting up to cover her mouth. She said it, she whispered, shuddering. He actually said it. Janelle closed her eyes and shook her head, as if the proof of what she'd suspected for so long were both crushing and freeing. Robin lost it. She covered her face with her hands and wept, her body racked with sobs. Her shoulders shook, her muffled screams filling the room as the tape kept rolling. Kody's color left his face. He bashed his fist against the table. This has been taken out of context. I didn't mean. The gavel of the judge came crashing down. Mr. Brown, you will hold your tongue. But the tape wasn't complete. Another soundbite was played. She's a burden. I don't need her anymore. As long as Robin has everything, we're fine. Meri will eventually fade away. The tone of his voice, cold, dismissive, heartless, rang like a curse through the room. Meri sat quietly, but silent tears streamed down her face. Not because of shock. She'd known all along. It was just the confirmation of finally having his meanness brought out for everybody to hear. Her lawyer turned off the machine. This, Your Honor, is not the voice of a man doing his best. This is the voice of a man making a decision. A decision to destroy his wife. The courtroom was silent as death. Even the journalists had stopped their angry scribbling in shock at the raw ugliness of the words. Christine's anger had boiled over. She stood, her finger stabbing straight at Kody. You lied to us all. You acted for years like it was our fault. Mine, Meri's, Janelle's, that we weren't good enough. But it was always you. You got to dictate who counted and who didn't. You played God with our lives. The judge banged his gavel hard. Mrs. Brown, sit down at once. But her words were already out there, and they could not be taken back. Kody was slumped in his chair now, his smirk erased, his body flattened. His attorney looked defeated, running a hand through his hair, as if even he could not spin this debacle. Robin cried louder, sobbing. Why? Why would you tell me that, Kody? Her mascara ran down her cheek, her delicate facade of being above it all destroyed in public. Janelle finally spoke, her tone even but tainted with grief. We always believed it was us, that we weren't working hard enough, that if we just gave a little bit more, he'd notice us again. But this shows that it was never about us. It was about him. Her words sliced through the room like a stealthy dagger. Meri stood at last, her voice trembling but firm enough to cut through the silence. You erased me in your heart a long time ago, Kody. But today, the world sees me. Today they see what you tried so hard to keep hidden. Her gaze met his firm, unyielding, and for the first time it was Kody who averted his eyes. The judge sat forward, her voice stern. This court has finally heard the evidence. And I will remind all of you here. This case is not about personalities, but justice, and justice will be served. But everyone in the room knew it. Justice had already started. The turning point had arrived. Kody Brown was no longer the self-assured patriarch. He was revealed, shattered. The kingdom he established upon favoritism and domination was falling apart, not in hiding, but under the unflickering glare of the law and the public's condemnation. And Meri? She was no longer invisible. She was the flame that ignited by his deceit. The courtroom was no longer the same. When Meri first arose to speak, the room had been heavy with doubt, tension, and the accumulated weight of years of pain left unspoken. But now, following the tapes, following the tears, following the confrontations that verged on fire, the room was charged. Everyone could sense it. The truth was finally out, and the walls of Kody Brown's kingdom were beginning to shake. The judge's gavel came down. Bang, bang, all rise. The bailiff shouted, and all in the room stood as the jury entered. Meri folded her shaking hands together and prayed silently. Her heart pounded, but her spirit was braver than ever. She had exposed her soul, jeopardized her dignity, and now all depended on strangers who had heard, seen, and believed the truth. Across the aisle, Kody shifted uncomfortably. His golden curls were damp with sweat. His once confident smile completely gone. He glanced toward Robin, who sat red-eyed and broken. Mascara smudged across her cheeks. She didn't return his look. She couldn't. Christine squeezed Meri's hand. "Whatever happens now," she whispered, "you already won." The jury foreperson stood, holding a slip of paper. The silence was unbearable, stretching each second into eternity. "We, the jury, find in favor of Meri Brown." The words crash like thunder. Gasps give way to applause from the crowd, quickly stifled by the gavel. Meri put her hand over her mouth, as tears streamed down her face. The anguish of years, the isolation, the belittling, the manipulation, just as suddenly vanished. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was validation. It was liberation. The judge went on. "This court finds that Meri Brown's charges of abandonment, neglect, and emotional damage are proven. Mr. Brown's behavior, as disclosed by evidence, manifests in knowing disregard. The court thus mandates financial restoration, conveyance of property rights, and formal dissolution of obligations owing Mrs. Brown under this union." Every word was like a hammer smashing the shackles that had held her for so long. Kody sprang to his feet, his voice trembling. "This is crazy. I'm the victim here. I gave my life to this family. Enough." The gavel came down once more, and the judge's voice was even harder now. "Sit down, Mr. Brown, or you will be in contempt." The mighty patriarch who had once been sat slumped back into his seat, his face pale, his hands shaking with futile anger. Meri rose gradually. For years, she had felt small compared to him, overshadowed and ignored. But today, standing tall, she felt bigger than life. She gazed at him, not with hatred, not even with anger, but with a power he could never comprehend. "You don't own me anymore, Kody," she whispered, though each word rang out. "You never did." Christine swiped at her tears, grinning through them. Janelle nodded vigorously, her eyes aglow with pride. Even broken and empty Robin appeared to grasp the reality. The fantasy of Kody's dominance had been shattered. The gavel fell
As
again.
the courtroom cleared,
This case is closed.
reporters thronged,
The aftermath.
cameras popping, microphones jutting out.
"Meri, how do you feel? Do you regret staying so long? What message would you like to convey to other women in your situation?" Meri hesitated at the courthouse steps, the warm afternoon sunlight on her face. She had fantasized about this moment, about being heard, understood, validated, but she didn't want her narrative to conclude with venom. She stood before the cameras, her voice firm. "For years I believed that being silent was strength. I believed that tolerating pain was evidence of love. But I've discovered that silence is the enemy of healing. My message to anyone viewing is this: you are not invisible. You deserve love. You deserve respect. And you deserve to be free." The audience applauded wildly. Some cried openly, moved by her bravery. Christine put her arm around her shoulders from behind. "You did it, Meri. You didn't just win for you. You won for all of us." Janelle contributed softly. "You broke the cycle. He can't control the narrative anymore." Meri gazed at them both, her chest filling with emotion. For so many years, those ties between them had been strained, manipulated, almost severed by Kody's favoritism. But here now, they stood together, not as sister wives to a man, but as women who had endured, who had opted for themselves. Robin hovered in the background, her face smeared with tears. She appeared lost, a queen without a kingdom. For the first time, Meri didn't feel jealousy, didn't feel competition. She felt compassion. Robin had anchored herself to Kody's foundering vessel, and now she was going down with him. Meri walked away. Today was all about her. A new dawn. That evening, Meri sat by herself in her still house, the heaviness of the day seeping finally into her bones. The silence wasn't the same anymore. No longer choking, no longer isolating. It was serene. She filled herself a cup of tea and gazed out the window at the stars. She remembered the girl she used to be, The young woman who was devoted to forever families and promises that never ended. She remembered the decades she had sacrificed, the tears she had swallowed, the nightmares she had endured. And she remembered the woman she had become today. Strong, seen, free. Her phone vibrated. A text from Christine. I'm proud of you. Dinner tomorrow. We'll celebrate in style. Another from Janelle. You gave us hope. Remember that. Meri smiled, her heart full. For the first time in years, she was no longer just hanging on. She was starting over. She whispered under her breath. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. The lens of life dissolved on her sitting quietly, her resilience shining stronger than any agony which had once imprisoned her.